It's Jalen's birthday and he doesn't feel good. That's a bummer.
It is a bummer.
Oh, here's Johan. Perfect.
All right, I think we're good to go.
We're good to go. You sometimes make me wait just a little beat.
I'm feeling confident tonight.
Okay, then I'm going to start the meeting.
Go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 15th. It is 7:02 p.m. I'm calling it to order the Common Council Ordinance regular meeting. We are going to start with our roll call. We've got Josh Goldstein, we have Heather Dunn, we have Nora Najewski-Eitner, we have Johan Lopez. We also have some staff members joining us tonight. We've got Vanessa Valadares from DPW, Jim Travers, and Greg Piscelli from TMP. So we are ready to start the meeting. Our first order of business is to discuss and vote on the City of Norwalk Complete Street Ordinance. And so, Brian, we can open the meeting with anybody who might be here who'd like to speak to the ordinance.
Sure. So just we have some people whose hands are raised. If you'd like to speak during the public hearing, please raise your hand. Right now we have three, so I'm just going to go on the order in which they were raised. When you unmute yourself, lower your hand, please give your full name and your address, and then please just discuss the public hearing, what we're here for, which is the Complete Streets Ordinance. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairwoman Shanahan and members of the committee, as well as the staff. My name for the record. Hello.
I would like some. Yes, please.
My name for the record is
Heather, we're hearing you, so maybe you could mute so that we could hear you. No problem. Okay. Sorry, Diane. Start over.
Go ahead, Diane.
Sorry.
okay. For the record, my name, good evening. And for the record, my name is Diane Lauricella, 21 Little Fox Lane. I just wanted to briefly state that I'm very pleased that the City of Norwalk is pursuing the Complete Streets project. I know it's been many months, years in the making. I think it will do a lot to increase our quality of life, but also create a safer environment. And it's really important to make sure we have all those options other than cars. And I appreciate the work done, and I'm going to be speaking when we get back to the general meeting. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very
Diane.
much.
Lisa, we also have Nicole Eady, one of our council members, is here, so I'm going to promote her to a panelist.
Great. Thank you. We'll add that to the minutes.
Yeah.
Awesome. And now you're going to open you'll call on the
Yep.
next. Great.
All right. So the next person would be Jamie. Again, I'm going to click on your name. Please unmute yourself, give your full name and your record, and you can speak about the Complete Streets. Thank you and welcome.
Hello, this is Kuuipo and Jamie Fales. We live at 48 Noah's Lane Extension in Norwalk, up near Cranberry. Just wanted to thank you all for working on this ordinance. It's really exciting. I was really happy to see it. I really appreciate all of the work that's gone into it, and I'm really excited about what it's going to do for the city. I specifically like how you've enshrined working with the Norwalk River Valley Trail and the Harbor Loop, and making that a key part of the mobility infrastructure for the city. I've been section hiking the Norwalk River Valley Trail. It's exceptional. I would love it that it connected and would make it possible to connect the entire city. I really appreciate that you're putting the safety of pedestrians first. I like that you have given yourself the goal of releasing a design guide within 30 days of the publication. I really appreciate how quickly that you are making this happen. I enjoy that you have a 3-year rolling project plan, and you're basically going to come up with projects and execute them. I think those are all very important. I really love the 15-minute city. Currently, I spend a lot of time driving between Cranberry and Marvin Beach. I cannot get from Cranberry to Marvin Beach in 15 minutes in a car. I'm really looking forward to the day that I can get from those two parts of town on a bus or on a bike within 15 minutes. We live about a mile from the Merit 7 train station. It takes us an hour and a half on public transportation when we could walk it and far less, but you can't because there's no sidewalks or crosswalks. So I'm really looking forward to the 15-minute city. Based on looking at best practices for complete streets on the Smart Growth of America website, there's a couple of things that could be added. One is about design excellence. I think there's a couple references to using like published standards. I think if you wrote that to talk about using best practices in design or criteria and guidance, rather than using that weaker reference to existing standards, that would help make sure that as things are developed, they're developed with a lot of thought and a desire for design excellence. The other piece that I saw that was missing was mandating coordination. So basically requiring private developers to comply with these and participate in complete streets. That's a big part of like the 10 best practices for smart streets. And then I also would really love to have a requirement in there that the sort of the steering committee for complete streets has to engage with Norwalk not-for-profits and community organizations. Right now, it seems like the steering committee is mainly made up of the city. And so it would be nice to have representatives from the community that's sort of required to participate. So I'm thinking of organizations like Norwalk Land Trust, Norwalk River Valley Trail, Sustainable Streets. There's a lot of really great organizations that could be nice to have them required to participate, or that there's a requirement to engage with the city. It's not clear what the reporting frequency is going to be, so I'm not sure how often there's going to be report outs on this. So adding that into the ordinance to make that requirement would be helpful. And then I think there's a number of places where the word charter was auto-corrected to chapter. So if you do like a search for chapter, and just double check that you really meant chapter rather than charter. Those are the only things I noticed, but this was really exciting to read and dig into. So I really appreciate you all for doing all this amazing work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers, Brian?
Yeah, we do. Just thank you, Jamie. Did she say chapter to charter or charter to chapter?
I think she
Charter
said
to chapter.
charter to chapter.
All right.
We can take a look at that. I'd be surprised, but
I don't see charter in here. Okay.
yeah.
Up next is Mike. Mike, I'm going to allow you to talk. Just again, full name and address for the record, and welcome, and go ahead.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, great. Hi, Mike Mushak, 50 Elmwood Avenue. Previously on planning and zoning for 15 years, retired last year, and helped start the bike walk task force initially, which became a commission. So familiar with all these subjects. I just want to thank you for working so hard on this. I think it's great. Looking forward to you all voting in favor of this ordinance. And between TMP staff and the Bike Walk Commission and lots of concerned people, including the Common Council and this committee, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. So I read the ordinance carefully. I see nothing in it that I would change. And in fact, the only thing I do want to add, I want to take a few minutes of your time, and I really appreciate the patience because I know all about the public speaking, and I've always given them lots of leeway when I'm planning and zoning. So when we're talking about issues of public safety and saving lives and preventing injuries, which is what this ordinance does, I take it very seriously. And I think, one of the big sort of shortfalls in Norwalk becoming a true 15-minute city, as the ordinance spells out, and the last speaker actually spoke about, which is 15 minutes by any mode, including bicycles, are the state routes through the city, which are substantial. Connecticut Avenue, Westport Avenue, which is Route 1, parts of East Avenue. We can go on. I have been going to meetings for 12 years on East Avenue. 12 years ago, in 2012, the first meeting, I presented the need for bike lanes on East Avenue. I subsequently, 2 years later, in 2014, did a detailed plan with bike lanes on East Avenue, including 4 lanes of traffic, even though I preferred the 3-lane road diet with a shared turn lane. Apparently, the traffic volumes on that road didn't support that, and I respected that. But I thought that 4 feet or 5 feet of shoulder, even though that's not preferred by a lot of cyclists, that acts in itself as a traffic calming measure. It slows traffic because you have narrower travel lanes, and it reduces the width of the crosswalk that someone has to walk into traffic. Because if you have a bike lane on both sides, you actually decrease the length of the crosswalk that people need to worry about cars. So there's lots of good reasons to have had bike lanes on East Avenue. Well, anyway, the latest plan from the state shows 4 11-foot lanes and no bike lanes on East Avenue. And I just think that's a sad, really sad oversight. And when asked, the state apparently said, well, someone from the city signed off on this. And I assume it's someone who's no longer on city staff, because we had a lot of retirees at DPW. But I just find it unconscionable that we're talking about complete streets and supporting this ordinance, but finding that the state is now taking one of the main downtown arteries that we're creating, a denser TOD zone with a lot of investment by state money. And the state's turning around and saying, well, bikes are not wanted here. And they've done this. I've been going to meetings. I asked for Connecticut Avenue to be made a bike route about 8 years ago. And the state came in and put striped 11-foot lanes and 2-foot shoulders, so that it encourages higher speeds, highway speeds, and it's a standard that should not apply in Norwalk. We should have 10-foot lanes on all of our state roads in Norwalk. And getting there, I don't know how that's going to be done, because we have no control over what the state does. But I am going to fight this battle. You're not going to hear it. You're going to hear about this again, because I really want the state to, oh, by the way, there's a 2009 Complete Streets law, state law, that was passed by the state legislature. And it requires the state to justify every dollar they spend on every project that involves state money to prove why they can't do bike lanes. And the reason they gave on the latest project, I'm sorry to take so much of your time, but it really is a matter of public safety and saving lives, which is why this is so important. I've been passionate about this my whole life. And on that Route 7 plan from Grist Mill to Kent Road, there's no bike lanes presented. And the reasons the state gave in order to get around the 2009 Complete Streets law was that somebody in Norwalk City, and the municipality of Norwalk, said that there are no cyclists in this area, number one. Number two, they referred to a plan done in 2019 called the Active Transportation Plan for the state, and said, oh, there's no bike lane, no bike routes on Route 7 indicated on that plan. Well, the only route through Norwalk on that plan is Route 136. The state had considered the rest of Norwalk not needing bike lanes or bike infrastructure, which is, I find, immoral, possibly illegal, and unethical, that we have the state telling us that we can't have, where we're spending money on Glover Avenue, state money, just building a train station to develop a TOD plan. Our land use was changed to encourage density there. We're building a TOD section with bike lanes on Glover Avenue, and they bump into Grist Mill with no bike lane. And the state's basically saying no bikes here. And I just cannot believe that. So this even though the Complete Streets law was passed in 2019 and is state law, we still have the state getting around it with these, I guess, just obsolete engineers. I don't know how any other way to explain it, why that is. And again, considering that the main arteries that bisect Norwalk are state routes, this is a huge, huge obstacle to Norwalk becoming truly bike friendly, is the state adhering to obsolete rules. So that, I've explained it. I am sorry to take all your time, but I am really just losing sleep over these constant plans coming forward Main Avenue by Stop and Shop. The state says 4 11-foot lanes and no bike lanes under that bridge as part of the new plan. So we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on plans that are obsolete. I will stop. Thank you again for your patience, and please support this complete streets ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mike.
Mike. We really appreciate it. We agree that we need more bike lanes, so we appreciate the plug for that, and we appreciate the work you've done to support it. Anybody
All right.
else, Brian?
Yeah, we have a couple more. Next is Harvey. Harvey, you can unmute yourself. Just give your full name and your address. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, my name is Harvey Jones, and I live at 12 Briar Street. I wanted to say, first of all, thank you. It's really great to see this. Like, the high level goal is awesome, and it's going to keep us moving towards a livable, walkable, safe city. I think it's a great capstone on all the investments that we've made in terms of walkability over the last couple of years. Like a year ago, it was really dicey and pretty dangerous for me to walk to the nearest grocery store and restaurant. And the Rowan Avenue sidewalk project, like, really just really helped that and has really improved my quality of life. And I see this as just, I want that for the rest of Norwalk, and I really see the Complete Streets Ordinance as delivering that. In terms of the implementation of it, there's two things I'd really like to see. The first is efficiency. Like, there's been a whole ton of progress over the last couple of years in terms of putting in new sidewalks and like other things around housing and transportation. And I really hope that we're able to keep up that momentum, and that we manage to balance the public good that kind of completing more projects does. So that, you know, obviously we want to change some behavior here, but I really hope that we don't add a lot of extra process, which slows down projects, which are themselves in the public good. I really hope that either, you know, the committee informally or the guide explicitly puts cost benefit and understands that a lot of the things that we want to do in Norwalk, that, like, just moving forward is itself really important. And obviously we want to steer the projects, but it's really important that we keep them going. And the other thing is focus. I'd really love to see kind of like coherence and a transportation network which really, like, looks at our uses and looks at specific pain points around safety and transportation issues, especially ones that a high number of residents face. And I hope when we look at implementation and how far, for example, we're pushing back on certain developments, that we look at the like whether the recommendations are solving like very specific and widely felt problems, and that we really focus our effort on just on solving the problems that, first of all, fit into a broader whole and the broader plan for transportation, and second of all, are things that are commonly felt by our residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harvey. Next is Paul Fox. Paul, can you give your full name and address for the record, and welcome.
Hello. My name is Paul Fox. I live at 26 Belden Avenue. I would like to speak specifically to a detail. Well, first of all, I'd like to echo what others have said in thanking the committee for doing this work. I think this is really important progress that we're making here. I would like to point out a specific thing that stood out to me reading the draft ordinance in section 17A3, talking about exemptions. It talks about projects that will have de minimis impact on the mobility system. And one of the examples it uses is signal modifications. But I don't think that's necessarily a very good example. There's been some studies that show that signal timing and signal design can have a significant impact on safety. And NACTO has a huge amount of guidance on best practices for signals. So I think that signal modifications should also, within the scope of the project at least, consider the best practices for safety and for complete streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next is Thomas. Thomas, please give your full name and address for the record, and welcome.
Hi there, I'm Thomas Blythe and I live at 25 Grand Street. I'm speaking today to voice my support for the Complete Streets Ordinance. As a bicycle and NTD commuter, I greatly appreciate the initiative to improve safety and mobility for all road users. I would like to highlight that, as mentioned in the ordinance, there are many global organizations which have existing design guides in English that could be references for best practices and design examples, such as the Dutch Transportation Ministry and the City of Oslo, Norway, and many others. Lastly, I would like to emphasize the importance of traffic calming measures and other design features to naturally enforce the desired driver behavior for public safety. Simply, the current state of affairs that 10 over is the standard speed on many local streets and roads should not be physically or psychologically possible. While one car's speed is a driver's responsibility, the population of cars' speed is the responsibility of street and road designers. This is a critical factor for the safety of commuters, students, and all residents of Norwalk. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Thomas. Next, we have Emily. Emily, please give your full name and address for the record, and welcome. Emily, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Burnman. I'm at 1 North Water Street, and I'm the chair of the Bike Walk Commission. I just wanted to quickly add, I wanted to wholeheartedly support the Complete Streets Ordinance in Norwalk and thank the Ordinance Committee for all their work that's gone into this initiative. I feel that it's a significant step towards creating a safer, more positive, and accessible and inclusive transportation network for all our Norwalk residents. And I'm really encouraged to hear the positive and constructive feedback from the public tonight as we continue to engage with this process and contribute ideas to help us build a more connected and vibrant Norwalk for people of all ages and abilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Next is Becca. Becca, please give your full name and address for the record, and welcome.
Hello, my name is Becca Stoll. I live at 26 Emerson Street in East Norwalk, where I think that Complete Streets would do us an absolute world of good. So I'm wholeheartedly in favor of adopting the ordinance. Specifically, I think that it's going to make that last mile commute feel safer for a lot of people who Metro North commute off peak and after dark. I count myself in this category. I regularly take trains after 10 p.m. from New York City due to my work schedule. I also want to point out that the addition of sidewalks, real, full, wide, ADA accessible sidewalks without impediments such as double poles, mailboxes, signs, are something that we really, really have to push for, and that I would hope the ordinance can address more directly. I'm thinking, for example, of Van Zant Street, where I walk under a roadwork ahead sign, or there's been moments on the drawbridge where there is a caution roadwork ahead sign in the bike lane, therefore rendering it useless. That's all, just voicing my support here and really looking forward to how it can help us make a more walkable, bikeable Norwalk, and especially East Norwalk. Thank you.
Thank you, Becca. Next, we have Tanner. Tanner, if you give your full name and address for the record, and welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanner Thompson. I live at 16 Hillside Place. I'm a member of the Bike Walk Commission. And as everyone else has, I wanted to voice my support for the Complete Streets Ordinance and for the initiative more generally. A couple points about why we need Complete Streets. Complete Streets is going to improve the quality of life for Norwalkers. It's going to improve public health in Norwalk. It's going to obviously improve environmental sustainability in Norwalk. But one point that I think isn't talked about quite enough is how complete streets are good fiscal policy. One anecdote that I want to share quickly is about Copenhagen. Everyone points to Copenhagen as a worldwide model of complete streets, especially when it comes to bicycles. Copenhagen also has very effective transit and is a very walkable city. But Copenhagen wasn't always that way. And in particular, the bike network in Copenhagen started to be built out in earnest in the 1990s, when Copenhagen was actually, the city government was going bankrupt. And the mayor at the time figured out that the only transportation infrastructure that they could afford to build was bike paths. And so they went all in on bike paths. And it obviously, in hindsight, we can see that it had great returns because all the other points that I've mentioned, environmental sustainability, public health, quality of life, have improved as a result. Obviously, we face not exactly the same set of challenges here in Norwalk to Copenhagen, but I think that it's very instructive. The more that we can incentivize people to use their feet and their bicycle and the bus and the train to get around, not only is that good for them, it's good for society and it's good for Norwalk. As I'm sure you know, if you've spent any time in city government, maintenance of roads is incredibly expensive, and highway projects are insanely expensive. I think we're looking at $250 million or so of federal and state money to rebuild the interchange between Route 7 and the Merritt, which if even a tenth of that was allocated to projects for walking and biking and public transit, that would pay huge dividends in Norwalk. So Complete Streets is going to be a win on many levels, but one of those is a fiscal level, as every dollar invested in walking and biking will pay back benefits tenfold. A couple of points of feedback on the ordinance. I've mentioned at every point here, walking and biking and public transit. These are a three-legged stool of transportation sustainability. And I want to urge the Ordinance Committee here to make sure that transit is a first-class citizen, a first-class consideration when making decisions about Complete Streets. There's a couple ways that could be done. I sent Lisa some sample language about changing or making the definition of mobility system a little bit more detailed and calling out public transit as one of those services that's kind of an auxiliary service in addition to the infrastructure that forms a critical part of our mobility system. Another thing I'd like to see, and I understand this may be out of scope for this round, but I really like to see transit have some explicit representation on this Complete Streets Committee, whether that's by the leadership of the Norwalk Transit District or by one of the board members of the Transit District, or some other person who we can trust to speak up on behalf of public transit, especially bus transit in Norwalk. The group that I'm involved with, Sustainable Streets Norwalk, last year did a citywide inventory of bus stops and found that almost half of bus stops in Norwalk do not even have a sign, meaning that there's no indication that the bus actually stops there. It's just a stop on the map. And only about 1 in 6 bus stops have a shelter. Very, very few bus stops have benches. And as a result, we see, for example, on Connecticut Avenue that most bus stops either have overturned shopping carts that people are sitting on, or they have benches that keep popping up that are clearly not provided by the city, but by volunteers. And this needs to be a critical component. This needs to be a first-class component of Complete Streets. I think that because so much of this infrastructure is missing, the bus is often invisible, and people don't consider the bus to be part of the street in most streets in Norwalk. But really, there's a lot of streets in Norwalk where people do ride the bus, but the infrastructure is lacking. And as a result, I think it would be well-deserved to have more representation, both in the text of the ordinance and in the composition of the committee for public transit. One other comment, and that is on the 3-year schedule and map. I love this idea. I think this speaks not only to an effective Complete Streets ordinance, but also to good governance generally and transparency. The question I have is what cadence that'll be updated on. I think the ordinance doesn't say anything about how often that 3-year schedule will be updated. I would suggest perhaps once a year. More often would be ideal, but obviously I don't want to be a burden on our TMP employees who are already giving everything they have to work on Complete Streets. So a little more definition around the cadence of updating that schedule would be great. Thank you again for all the work that's gone into this on the technical side in TMP, DPW, et cetera. Also on the legislative side, on the commission or the committee, the ordinance committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanner.
Are those all of our commentators?
Anybody else who hasn't spoken yet, who would like to speak on complete streets? I think that's it.
Okay, great. So with that, I will close the public hearing on complete streets and open up the conversation with our committee. First, I want to thank Josh Goldstein, who has really held the pen throughout this entire process. It's been a lot of work. We appreciate all of the meetings you've had, Josh, all of the drafts and redrafts. We also appreciate Vanessa and Jim's contributions. I think we've sat down with them several times as well. So we have a worn path to both of their offices, and we appreciate all the time and effort that their departments have contributed to making this ordinance what it is today. Before we get started, before I turn it over to Josh, can you pull up the ordinance, Brian, so that people can see the small changes we've made since the last time we all spoke? And then I'll turn it over to Josh to kind of walk through it.
All right, so as you can see, in 1-4A, the new language is identified with yellow highlight. I'll just read the sentence. The city is hereby directed to develop a complete streets design guide, the new language, a draft of which shall be made available in accordance with section 14B, which is the section below, no later than 30 days after the adoption of this chapter. That's the only change.
Yeah, and the reason why we did that change, and Josh will speak to it, is so that we can coordinate the, other members of the committee noted that we had a different process for the adoption versus the amendment. But Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you to take it from there.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And before I started, two public service announcements. One, I have a cold. I'm sorry. Two, I want to thank and while I appreciate that Lisa says that I held the pen on this one, this was a real team effort. And Lisa, I also think it's, worth thanking Tom Livingston from the mayor's office, and, FHI, the consultant who really helped us throughout this process, and obviously the TMP, Jim, Garrett, Greg, and the team, as well, of course, as Vanessa Valadares and Jim Meehan, who we got a lot of helpful feedback that has made this a much, much, much better ordinance from where it started. I don't feel I need to do a blow by blow, because for those committee members, you've seen, this ordinance obviously has not changed a lot in the last month or so. I just want to note a couple things. One, the definitions in between work with our consultants, making sure that the language mirrors particularly the Connecticut Department of Transportation, as well as the U.S. Department of Transportation, to make sure that not only are definitions consistent so that we can apply the law consistently, but also so that as city departments apply for grants, having specific terms in our legal documents is an important aspect of those applications. You'll see in 1.3, and that really starts on page 4, we put this is a policy change that we have been talking about for a long time in terms of street design. And that policy is enumerated in the ordinance. And you can see it on page 4 and a little bit of page 5. I don't feel like I need to go into every aspect of this, especially since I actually think a lot of people, public comment, did a very good job going through it. But suffice it to say, the main goal of Complete Streets is to make our streets walkable and safer and multi-user friendly. Or I think the term is multimodal, but a lot of people don't know what that term means, and God knows I didn't when this process started. But to make it so that, frankly, it's not just cars on the road, and so that people have access to public transportation, people can bike, people can walk, people can, if they are in a wheelchair, they can get from point A to point B without, the goal is to get them without much of an impediment. Obviously, we have a legacy of a lot of sidewalks that were either not on busy streets, or were partially done. And so part of this is connecting our mobility system so that people can get from point A to point B, with the goal being that we are a 15-minute city, which we are not yet, but we're making tremendous strides to get there. I want to move on to 1.4, which is the design guide. The design guide is a crucial piece to the puzzle here. This is something that I know is currently most of the way under development with the city. And I know that the departments have been working on the design guide itself. And obviously one thing we have here is that it is a technical document designed to provide both, city departments on actually how to implement the Complete Streets policy in accordance with a lot of helpful manuals and policy guides and engineering guides on the subject. As you can see, there is a process, and Brian sort of highlighted the change in 1.4a, but that there is a process by which that if there are amendments to the design guides, which we expect there will be over time as best practice has changed over time, that there is both an amendment process, but also a way by which the public can provide input. The section 1.5 concerns the responsibilities of the Complete Streets Coordinator. Again, this is a lot of stuff that we have already sort of covered, but the idea is that the Complete Streets Coordinator, or the person in the position of the Department of Chair of the Department of Transportation, Chief of Transportation, Mobility, and Parking, will be that point person and will, specifically be working in concert with the Chief of the Department of DPW, or Operations and Public Works, and making sure that street design, both above and below the street, are consistent with the Complete Streets policy. Again, that's, 1.6 sort of emphasizes that, and that includes the 3-year improvement schedule, which is something in terms of improvement schedules is something that the city already sort of engages in as a practice. A lot has been made under sort of exemptions versus exceptions. Exemptions, more on the exceptions than the exemptions. You can see that the exemptions are, you can see if we are legally preempted, right? Because you sort of the, sort of basic components of whether a project is exempt from Complete Streets. I will defer to Jim Travers or Greg on the comment made in public comment about signal modifications. I will just highlight it to say it's not what you think. It's not every signal modification. It's actually more, it's not major changes. Jim, I don't know if you want to just touch on this right now, since it did come up earlier tonight.
Sure, Councilperson. Thank you. Yeah, I think our use of terminology with that specific example is that there are many different components to a traffic signal, right? And certainly there is no larger advocate for signal optimization than me, right? And I firsthand know the importance and the results that come from good signal optimization. I think what we were looking at here there's a variety of different components that makes the signal operational. So in its issue of detection, right? So there are different forms of detection, whether we have loops cut into the road, whether we have video detection that's unmanned, whether we have a camera detection that's capturing where the vehicle are. Those are the types of additions that we were that we had in mind when we were talking, as an example of signals, is just how what would be a normal maintenance or state of good repair issue that those are the types of improvements we were talking about.
Thank you, Jim. Just before we sort of come to a landing here, exceptions, we have laid out a process by which, if there are people, that encompasses both public and private entities who may seek an exception. You can see that B sort of lists, and it's not an inclusive list, but a list of reasonable and appropriate reasons for requiring an exception. But the thing that I want to just highlight on, because I know this came up in public comment, was sort of referring to it as a steering committee. It's not really a steering committee. The Complete Streets Committee is really designed to meet and adjudicate exception requests. There is a process by which reports are supposed to be disseminated to the members of the committee. They then have a certain amount of time, I believe it's a 45-day review period, to review those exception requests so that they can be done in a timely manner that doesn't both derail projects, but also we do not want it to be used as a tool in a nefarious effort to derail projects. We that committee is composed of both city employees as well as appointed officials. And the composition of that committee is in the definition section of the ordinance. And of course, and one of those, the two appointed officials are the chair of the Bike Walk Commission, chairperson of the Bike Walk Commission, and the chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The idea being that it's not just city staff, that there is some input from residents and appointed officials. There is, that anyone seeking an exception does have legal rights and due process rights as enumerated in the ordinance and as reflected in state law. But I just want to make it clear it's basically an exception review board, not just an overall policy committee. And then of course the last part is about progress reporting, and the idea being that it's going to help us be able to show the people how we are implementing complete streets in this city, and the progress in implementing complete streets policy across the city. And that annual report, which is something that Jim and Garrett and the TMP team sort of engage in that practice already, to sort of report and distill statistics, and it's very revealing. I mean, this is a way to help us sort of really get a handle on the complete streets policy at work, which is obviously what a lot of people here on the call and out in Norwalk really want. So we want to be transparent in that effect. This is obviously, a major piece of the puzzle. We're going to talk about some of the other pieces of the puzzle after the public hearing, namely amendments to ordinances to make sure they are consistent with the policy that we are seeking to pass onto the Common Council here tonight. But I just want to, before I end, want to thank the members of the committee who have really taken the time to dive into this, who we've all spoken with, who've given a lot of insightful comments, and we've been able to make improvements upon. Other members of the council who aren't members of the committee, but who have taken an interest in this. And then, of course, city staff. And frankly, the most important are the many residents who really care about this and who have spent a lot of time showing up at night at public hearings when they have work schedules and making their voices heard. And it's not just here at the Ordinance Committee. I mean, at the public hearing, at the budget public hearing that happened a few weeks ago, many of the comments were about passing complete streets policy and transportation infrastructure improvements. And I think it's important to show both here, not only that we're willing to talk about it, but that we're really willing to do something about it. And that's something I'm really proud of. And I'm proud that we're at this place with this policy and project.
Great. So I just have one comment before we'll open it up to the rest of the committee. Tanner mentioned that he sent us along some ideas about how to maybe change the definition of mobility system. And I wanted to have Jim, sorry, I've got some beeping going on, have Jim just speak to that one definition. If we could go to mobility system there, Brian, so that we can show that definition and explain to the general public why we feel as though that definition covers the concerns that other people might have had about transit being properly involved. So Jim, you had some comments you wanted to share on that.
Sure. So after we spoke today, I took those comments, I shared them with our consultant. And I think, it solidified the conversation that we had, is that, we really were looking at this language, that was broad, but was consistent with the language that you would see coming from the FHWA, right? I think that is important that it's there, but it's also, it's not, it's about creating an entire network. So we didn't want to look at just that we didn't want to look at a definition that specifically called out everyone, right? Every single thing, because what happens when a successful mobility system changes or it evolves over time, and we don't have that specific thing in there, right? So we left an umbrella that can get there. But I think from a perspective of public transit, I think the city has done leaps and bounds, right? We have a number of train stations. Our train stations are top notch. We work very closely with the transit district, and in fact, we're working with them through a COA, an operational analysis to really look at how we could improve situation transit in the city. We were one of the first to come to work with them on first mile, last mile, and Norwalk should take that as a big feather in the cap, right? We are doing things that aren't being done in every other community in the state. We're going to be the first municipality in the state to introduce transit signal priority, which will be emitters on a bus that will be able to extend the green time or advance the green time on traffic signals as buses are arriving, so that we can ensure that we have arrivals on time, right? So I think calling out just one, I think then causes pause to call out specifically to all, but more importantly, I do think there's a value in us maintaining the same language that we see coming from the federal government and in our partners at the state as well.
So that definition really tracks with what the Federal Highway Administration does, and that's why we use that, so that when it's recognized in grants and it's recognized, in other types of documentation. So we just want to keep it standard, which is why we use that language.
Yeah.
Got it.
And this is about prioritizing everything, right? So this is putting there. So everything is at the top.
Gotcha. So other comments or concerns from the committee members? At this time, I'd like to open up the conversation to our committee. I mean, I know you guys have seen this about 1 million times. I feel like we almost are like dreaming about it at this point. So if there's not really further comments, we can vote to take it to the Common Council if on somebody's motion. Jim, you want to say something more?
Yeah, if I can for a second, because in when listening to the comments and thank you for taking this on, and I'll echo those comments that we heard from residents all throughout the city, right? This is it's a great investment for us in the city, but there are many things that we've been doing, right? What the Complete Streets process has done is really codify those, right? So I think a number of people talked about, a 3-year project schedule. It really has to say, like, Vanessa and her team, we have the most amazing team in DPW. This is work that they've been doing, right? This is work they've been doing all along, right? We're just codifying it, along with a number of things. And, I do have to say, like, I think, Vanessa and I get to come to meetings and we get to hear from people and we get to hear the positive comments that come, but it really is it really is deep into the DPW and TMP and the people that are out on the street every day doing the work and working really hard to deliver these. They're taking guidance from us, right? But they're the ones that are actually delivering it. And I think the Complete Streets Design Guide will help to deliver that, right? It'll be another tool. It is not a magic wand, right? And it doesn't mean that we still don't engineer our roads. It gives us more tools in our toolbox, right? And I think that's the best thing. Like it's looking at the work that we're doing, offering up a different solutions, and then really getting people together and talking about projects and moving it forward, right? But I do think that we need to give credit to the amount of work that has been done in the city to advance this, the teams that have worked very hard to put that in place, and then just recognize the fact that a lot of some of the things that were put down in there were things that the city was already doing, right? And it's not that it's new, it's there, and it's codifying it. So thanks to team. I think we get to work with an amazing Common Council, but we also get to work with amazing staff that's in City Hall every day. And, so I think I can speak for myself, very happy to move this forward, but I also have to give one shout out to Garrett Palella, who has worked tirelessly to make this happen. Massive amount of hours where I've been saying he needed to take a break. And so and he wasn't listening to me, and he's actually home quite ill right now. So hopefully on the mend. But so he's unfortunately tonight was the precipice for all of it, and he wasn't able to make it. So major call outs to Garrett, who worked really, really, really hard on everything to get us where we are.
Second that 1,000%. Garrett was instrumental not only in helping us wade through a lot of sort of the really nitty-gritty policy and technical engineering details, but also was a very effective liaison to help the consultant help us, especially in areas where we didn't understand what they were doing, just because they come in with a level of expertise that we don't have. So Garrett did incredible work. Also, Garrett knows how to paint a street. If any of you came to the Complete Streets demonstration project, that was pretty awesome. So hope we can get to do more of that in the future too.
All right.
Yeah, so Garrett, wherever you are, we hope you're sleeping and not watching this. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
please.
We'll see. We'll tell you what happens tomorrow. So any further comment or Heather?
I have a question, actually. For the committee that's put together to review exceptions, was there any discussion about including police officers? So that because
I can answer
I
that
know I was
no.
riding my bike this weekend along the River Valley Trail, and there was like a left turn lane at the same time as the crosswalk. I was able to walk, and I was just thinking if police were involved, they might have some insight into it. It might be a good thing. I don't know.
I kind of feel like that's why we hired Jim to be the traffic expert about deciding where crosswalks ought to be placed and things like that. So
I also
when they're
just
there,
note-
but to just let people know, we have officers who are watching traffic patterns daily.
Absolutely. And the one thing I'd say, Heather, is one place where the police absolutely have a voice is the traffic authority, where a lot of the sort of traffic decisions that come through the traffic authority really are the police get to weigh in, and obviously there are a lot of traffic related statistics, and that's something that I know we've talked with Chief Walsh and his team about on many occasions, and they're incredibly helpful. I would just note that this committee, it's based, I really calling it a committee kind of is almost, it's not misleading, but it's not exactly what it is. It's an exception review board. That's essentially what it is. So, that from that standpoint, it's helpful to have the input of anyone who can help, sort of make policy decisions and make them better. But I don't think it's necessary to have them in this particular circumstance.
I would like to hear from them and what their perspective
Sure.
is before allowing somebody to do something that's going to impact them, that they're going to have to, keep an eye on and make sure that people are complying, or that turning right on red when it says no right on red. People are doing that constantly all over the city. And they're the ones who have to enforce it. So
yeah, but again, that's not really what, this isn't an enforcement ordinance. This is more of a design of the streets type thing, which is why we have an expertise in traffic mobility about how things ought to be engineered. Certainly the police reports help, right, Jim, wouldn't you say?
So let me because I think she brings a valid point, right? And I think and so does Josh. Like this is really exception report where we looked to try to get people with subject matter experts together to talk about it. But that doesn't negate the fact that good policy, good design really comes from good communication, right? And I think that's I think we're looking at that as in a larger umbrella. Like, I can speak personally for the police department, they all have all of my cell phone numbers, right? 6 minutes after the bridge fire, I was on the assistant chief was on the phone with me, right? I call the chief or the assistant chief on a regular basis. We talk about each of them, but I think, Josh also brought up a really great time. The once a month meeting in the traffic authority is where we really look at discussing changes. Like all the changes that get put through traffic actually go to the traffic authority, which the police officers are there at the time. But we do make regularly with the folks who are doing enforcement on the street. They come to us. We share some of the data that we have that becomes valuable to them. We look at for their input when we do it. So I think that communication is going to be key in not only moving Complete Streets forward, but just advancing us in everything that we do, right? I just rest assured that it might not be specifically written in there for that committee, but it doesn't negate the fact that we do and we value the police opinion, and we speak with them on a regular basis.
Other thoughts or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to take this to Common Council. Oh, Josh, are you making a comment or are you?
No, I am making a motion to take the
Okay.
Complete Streets ordinance to the November 12th common council meeting. So the first meeting in November. Just a little note, the reason we're doing that is because of the next subject we're going to talk about. We want to make sure that the timing is closer together on some of these other component pieces, and also to make sure that's just that there's a scheduling issue there too. So the motion is to take it not to this next council meeting, but the one after that.
All right, all in favor for committee members? That is unanimous. Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for all the hard work, Josh, especially for carrying the pen. Thank you for Jim and Vanessa for attending. I think they're sticking around because the next ordinance is also about that. But and first, we need to do some other business, which is to open public comment for the balance of the agenda. So if Josh, you could see if anybody has their hands raised for that, that would be great.
Brian.
Did I say Josh? I did. I meant Brian.
I'm on mute. We got Diane Lauricella. Diane, you could lower your hand. Just give your full name and address again, and please go ahead. Welcome.
Good evening again. Diane Lauricella, 21 Little Fox Lane. Interesting discussion today, and congratulations on moving the last item forward. Tonight, I wanted to speak to the issue related to DPW. I spoke last month and noted that none of my suggestions have been put in and changed. So I am, once again, I'll explain why I said that I made the statements that I did. In 90-1, Establishment and Function, item B, I believe since you are diving into this ordinance, I do not see any reason why there could not be some mention about recycling and reusing, because while I've been assured that Vanessa and others, even those of you who are currently on the council, care about recycling, this ordinance should show that the main goal is to reduce the amount of disposal and collection of solid waste. And I know many of you care about the subject, but it's not reflected in the wording. And since you are tweaking this ordinance, I think this is a time to say at least that under B, the goal of reducing the amount of collection and disposal, or some especially the wordsmiths on this group, the attorneys, there must be a way to show in action what you speak. Actions speak louder than words. In 90-2, under Chief of Operations, I've been seeing this lately in the senior positions of the city, is that there's been a reduction of the qualifications. And this particular item, the chief across the board is a well-paid person. And so I do think at the very least, you could add that a engineering degree, or I'm sorry, an engineering certificate is preferred at the very least. If not, then I ask that you add more than 5 years prior executive and administrative function, because of the enormity of all of the things in this ordinance that are the responsibility of the chief. Of course, the chief does not upfront do all these things. There is the water pollution control plan, etc. But the thing is, they have to have an aptitude to understand what engineers are telling them. Even though there is in 90-5 a principal engineer, the person at the top needs to have the aptitude and the knowledge, the wisdom, and the connection so that they can make sure that whatever their staff does below them, that it is going to help save money, keep us safe, help us keep healthy in the waters of the state of Connecticut, etc. Under record keeping, I again ask that there be that you reestablish some accountability of record keeping, that the chief would be responsible to make others do. I would like to know when it refers to the accounting of expenditures. So I'd like to know who then will be responsible for the accounting of all expenditures. Definitely, we don't want to burden them with constant reporting, but there must be some record keeping of that related to expenditures on a regular basis, at least for the Finance and Claims Committee and the DPW Committee. Lastly, the new item B, which is formerly D, is a record of complaints by the public. I believe the public needs to understand that this record, which was on the books, is available. Where is it available? And also, I'm hoping that this city, now there are still too many streams of places where people can file complaints. It would be really great that we have one feeding structure so that the public will know where to look to make sure that their complaints or their neighbors' complaints have been handled. So please, once again, please try to take item B, 9D-1, item B, add the goal of reducing, or at least mention recycling, or some other phraseology, and then please make sure that the chief of operations has an engineering. I know that some of you went back to the mayor, but none of you are engineers, to tell you the truth. So please, I do think it's important to have an engineer at the top of this very important department. I don't know if Vanessa has such a thing, but I hope she does. I thought she was an engineer, but I'm not sure. I don't think we should in any way reduce important positions to accommodate folks that we would like to hire, and not this trend of hiring consultants all the time. In our senior operators, senior staff that gets paid very well, they should be able to have the same skills so they can decide whether their consultants and staff are handling things correctly. So thank you for your time. I hope that you listen to at least some of what I say and keep an open mind this time, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Anybody else? Does anyone else like to speak? If so, please raise your hand. Nobody else has raised their hand.
Okay, so I'll close public comment at this time and go back up to the agenda because I was looking at the ordinance. Closing public comment brings us to the acceptance of the minutes at the last meeting, September 17th, 2024, which is a special meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as filed, or does anybody have any amendments? Thank you for the motion, Heather. Does anybody have any amendments, changes, corrections? I can't see everybody, Brian, because I'm in the comic strip. Okay, there we go. So I don't see any amendments or changes. So seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes as filed? Okay, that's great. Now we can go back to sharing the screen because I'll go through some of the changes in.
Hey, Lisa.
Yep.
I thought we wanted to make a motion to alter the agenda.
Oh, yeah, we could do that now. What I want to do is for new business, I'd like to take section 95 before we do the blight, because it's all kind of part of the Complete Streets package. So would you like to make a motion to that effect, Josh?
So moved.
Josh just made the motion. All in favor of consolidating all of the Complete Streets together? Thank you. So we'll change the agenda to that. So first we'll talk about 90, then we'll go to 95, and then our last order of business will be to cover the blight. We'll let Jim and Vanessa and Greg go at that time. So Brian, if you could pop 90 up, that would be great, because I can't really see it in my small telephone. So just to bring everybody's attention to this, what we needed to do after the adoption of Complete Streets is to look at other ordinances that the city has that need to be coordinated with the new Complete Streets packages. And one of the first ones that we needed to take a look at is Chapter 90, which is with regard to operations and public works, the Department of Public Works. And so generally speaking, this ordinance follows what I think is Chapter 14 in the charter. And we pretty much picked up all of that same language, but we've made a couple of changes just to coordinate so that now Section 90 is not in opposition to our Complete Streets ordinance. And so the first place to look is 90-1E, which is where we say that DPW and TMP will now collaborate on the Complete Streets for the mobility section. So that's the changes that we made in that area. We also pick up the definition of mobility system that we were speaking about before in Complete Streets.
And just sorry to interject, Lisa, it's Charter Section 14-6, The subsections track the subsections in City Code Chapter 90-1. Notably in subsection E, the Department of Operations and Public Works will maintain all other public improvements carried out with the exception of collaborating with TMP on this mobility system. So that is the only change in E, really, even though there's a lot of language there. Go on.
Yeah, it looks more complicated than it is. We've also made other changes to coordinate this ordinance. Whenever we open up an ordinance, we like to make it gender neutral and bring it kind of into compliance with some of the things, some of the ways we write ordinances now. So you'll notice that he and she go to they and things like that. I don't think we have too much in H, right? We just added
small changes.
Yeah.
As you can see, we removed separate department and put separate ordinance. We put operation and maintenance of, just to explain the type of actions that'll be taken. Some removal of some other language and just kind of cleaning up subsection H. Not much there.
Not much there. M is kind of where a little bit of a change from the charter is. The charter enables us to change what's going on in the operations by ordinance or by rule of the mayor. And so we just added the language saying that we're going to collaborate with TMP and other relevant departments in in the construction, in the planning, design, construction, and maintenance of the mobility system.
Right. The only change here is that M says you can do this, that the duties or responsibilities of the DPW and the chief of the DPW can be assigned. There can be assignments either by ordinance or by the mayor. And here in M, in continuation of the Complete Streets ordinance, it's just indicating that the chief of DPW and the DPW will collaborate with TMP in a manner that's consistent with an ordinance that's just been sent on to Common Council.
Right. So a lot of talk was talked about the chief of operations, whether or not they're going to have a professional engineering degree. Nothing that we're doing in this section says that the chief of operations won't have an engineering degree. We just felt as though that it just gives the option to reach to more people for this role by saying that it's not a requirement. It already says that they have to have 5 years of applicable executive administration. It's important to remember that Vanessa, who is our current chief, not only oversees DPW, but she also oversees Rec and Parks and the waste management system, things like that. So it's a broader job than just construction of, just engineering projects. So we just thought it was, just gave people more options. Does anybody, Josh, do you want to say anything more about that? Or Brian? I mean, that's how we were thinking about making it just broader. It doesn't mean that it won't be chief of, a principal engineer, but it just makes it a broader pool of
I mean, just to respond to what Diane said during her public comments specifically, before being the chief of operation and public works, Vanessa was first an engineer and then the principal engineer. So she has an engineering degree, and she was the principal engineer before she became the chief of operation of public works. Just so everyone who's listening
knows that Vanessa has a great resume.
Which is why she has the job. Yes. She's fantastic at her job.
I just want to note one other thing, which is there is a national trend that has happened in governments, frankly, state governments, especially across this country, where there has been a reduction in the requirements in an effort to be more inclusive of different applicants. However, the decision of who to hire obviously belongs to not only this mayor, but future mayors. And then obviously the council still has the right and the responsibility to confirm those appointees. So those powers don't go anywhere. The mayor is still responsible for reviewing and hiring a person in this, the director of chief operations of public works. It's not to say that there shouldn't be someone with a PE. It's just to give that executive, that mayor more latitude. And you just never know who's going to sort of shake out, and they may be a really good fit for the department. So I don't want the horse to get too in front of the cart. That's my understanding of the intention of making this change, and I think it's an overall good public policy decision. And just in general with of hiring practices that have happened in governments across the country.
Exactly. Exactly. The next part, we are for approval of rates and fees. What we're trying to do is have less expensive notice. So we're basically trying to put it in a situation where we're going to give public notice in a manner consistent with the charter of the city of Norwalk. The idea being that right now we have to do a lot of publications in newspapers. It's highly, highly expensive. So to the extent that we don't have a requirement by state law or, oh, sorry, I've got these noises going on, but I have to have,
Ordinance.
yeah, an ordinance. We just try to limit it to what is the least required. The last charter revision has taken it away from having to have newspaper publication, but there are some places, for instance, I think Vanessa will tell us that with the water pollution
WPCA.
control, yeah, the WPCA in the next section, we have to have it published in newspapers. So that is the changes there.
Yeah, just quickly, an example would be in our charter and in our ordinance, the ordinance committee must there must be a public hearing before any ordinance are passed. Another example would be, and that's one way of saying that we're consistent with the charter, because the charter says we have to be consistent with the charter, ordinances, and state statutes. And then the second example here is the WPCA, where it doesn't matter what we want, the state statute says we must have a posting in the paper. And so therefore, instead of constantly trying to tinker with 90-4 A and B by amending what everything is, we just say consistent with the charter, because the charter says that we need to track ordinances, charter, and also state statute, obviously.
Right. So we're just trying to consolidate the language there. And then the final sections that are big, let me look at 96. I just think that we just say that, so 90-6 is to try to free the chief from having to sign other engineering services that are done by other departments, other principal engineers. That would be if TMP has principal engineer that provides plans. In this case, we would want the chief to look at and oversee those, but does not have to have the requirement that they sign it. And then D is, if you can roll that up a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. That's just, once again, trying to make, putting the collaboration that's required from the Complete Streets back into this section. And then the recording requirements, we went down in 97. We talked to Vanessa, we talked to Tom Livingston, the chief. A lot of these things that are required in the record keeping are already being done by our finance department. So we're just taking those requirements out because they're being done in other ways. And Vanessa can describe those if anybody has concerns about that. And those are pretty much the big changes. So any questions, or Vanessa, do you want to comment on, some of the reporting requirements where we were trying to take stuff out of the ordinance that is done by other departments on the reporting requirements in particular?
No, I don't have any comments on that.
Okay, so just clearly, it's being done by other finance officers and operations. So just opening up for questions and concerns from the committee. This is the first time we're putting through the draft, so we're happy to take any questions or comments, starting with Johan.
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question. Does 90-1, does the terminology does it automatically encompass recycling as a key component, or do we have to explicitly differentiate?
I think Vanessa, wouldn't you say that, solid waste is otherwise, how would you change that? It covers that activity, doesn't it?
It does. Solid waste is everything related to really solid waste, the way that we have, like the sewer that is under the BPCA is related to all of the other type of waste. So the solid waste is considered now yard waste, bulk waste, the regular solid waste, and recycling.
So it's covered in the
composting now as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, and composting. So it feels as though if we list things, like to Jim's point earlier about the other ordinance, we just don't want to necessarily narrow ourselves by listing things that may not include everything. Is that any other questions, Johan, before I move to Nora?
Oh, no, thank you. That answers it.
Okay, great. Nora.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to double check, and I would love to hear from Vanessa on this. This section regarding no longer requiring her to sign off on drawings. Is there any risk that we're losing coordination there? There is a logic to having sort of, final oversight. So I wanted to touch base and see if this is in fact an efficiency measure, or if we're risking any loss of oversight in that with that change.
No, again, I'm an engineer, right? So I'm gonna answer as an engineer on this one. I do think that if there is a requirement for the chief of operations to sign the drawings, it is an extra layer that people can look and see if there are any mistakes that will be made through the set. That sometimes it happens. So I don't have a strong position against with or without it, but I have to say that as of now, it is common that sometimes when we're looking over a set, even if it was done by a third party, we ended up catching some mistakes. And mistakes, when I say, is not as a bad thing, but I think that sometimes, for instance, we do know about other projects or other things that looks at the big picture of it. So when we hire a consultant, sometimes you're looking at a specific portion of what that project is designated to, and whoever will be sitting in this position have a much more bird's eye view of everything. So I think that when they look through the set, they look also with that in mind. But again, if the chief of operations will not going to require a PE license, then there would be no reason for the person to sign, because what the person is signing, right? So this is something that you guys will have to also discuss and think about it.
But also, Vanessa, what we tried to do in order to respond to concerns about that is that we want to make sure that it says where the principal engineer has been given an opportunity to review and provide comment. So your department would still be, the idea would be that you would still be given this project to review and have comment, right? The idea was so that if the TMP goes forward with their principal engineer signed plans, you guys don't have to countersign a plan that another department's executing, right? Wasn't that the theory when we were working through that?
Right, that's what you guys presented, that we always going to be collaborating, and we still also have the comments for sure.
Josh, do you have any other thoughts about that? This is something we really toiled over.
I mean, look, the shibboleth, the real key to this is the collaboration and coordination. And frankly, Chapter 90 was written at a time where there was no TMP. And in order to make sure that the policy is consistent across the ordinances, this was sort of the compromise, and I mean compromise not in a bad way, but a good way. I mean, making sure to work with the departments and come up with a solution where both it's not where DPW is in a position where they're signing off on street design work, which just something is not, they're just not as expert in certain facets of that as others. And the reverse is true also with TMP, and like they don't have expertise in sewage and drainage. So it's making sure that the complete streets policy is going to be implemented in a way that works so that the city departments can work well with each other. Having a extra sign-off requirement, I think, can sometimes counteract against sort of the policy goals here.
I have to admit, I want to think about this one more. I'm concerned that as written, it does not sufficiently ensure that everything is in fact coordinated, right? I mean, giving the principal engineer the opportunity to review and comment is maybe not strong enough, right? There is review and comment doesn't necessarily mean that the comments have to be acted upon. And so I have some concerns about that. So I want to think about that more. I'm just not sure that it really sufficiently protects the city in terms of having the person who ultimately has the department that ultimately has the responsibility for implementation on a lot of our roadway projects to really make sure that they're fully coordinated. And along the same lines, I very much hear what you're saying, Josh, on the chief role and requirements, I guess the question is just to confirm, I want to make sure I understand. Even if the chief did not have an engineering degree, the principal engineer would still be required to have such a degree. So we would
Yes.
still be required to have someone in the department who
Yeah,
had
I mean,
that level of expertise.
Yeah, and as a very practical matter, Nora, there needs to be someone who has the licensure and the, you know, the ability to literally sign off on designs. That person, you know, obviously Vanessa has the sufficient licensing to do that, but good news is so does Jim Meehan. And the principal engineer is the person who is required to have those credentials. It's not to say again that the city isn't going to hire someone in Vanessa's position who, like, it's not, they're not required to hire someone who doesn't have that qualification.
Sure, of course not.
I just want to make it very clear. It's not, because I think that's kind of gotten a little misunderstood through the ether, which is that we're not saying the person must not have this qualification. It's just saying the person who you're hiring, you know, who, again, Mayor Rilling, future mayor, may hire does not have to have this qualification. And again, if the mayor feels that person is sufficient and the council does not feel that person is sufficient, then the council can invoke its powers. You know, and then, you know, we're not stripping anyone's legal authority to both appoint and oversee and confirm.
And also, Nora, not to complicate it, but TNP has its own principal engineer. So they do have the qualification to prepare those designs and submit them. So it's not as though the city's not protected by having a principal engineer sign off on the plans. In this case, Garrett has the principal engineering degree, right, Jim? Isn't that the case? So it's not as though a principal engineer is not signing off on these plans. There is a principal engineer with the proper qualifications signing off on the plans. So the city should be protected.
Okay, it's interesting. I'll definitely have to give it some more thought. I just, at the end of the day, I think that having a buck stops here is usually very valuable for any organization. And I worry that having two places where the buck stops is a potential for conflict in the future. I think that's ultimately my largest concern here. But definitely something I think we should continue to think about, and I'll give it some more thought as I hear other people's thoughts.
Okay, so Heather, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I do have concerns about removing that requirement, because I would want somebody who is at the head of an organization to have knowledge of everything. And I think that's why Vanessa is so successful. And I would want that for every person that we hire from then on. But that's me personally. I would love to hear from Vanessa on how important she thinks it is and what the pros and cons are of somebody at the very top having that skill set. She would.
I think it is important, to be honest, and I think that you don't take my advice is don't take this ordinance change just focus on the complete streets. I think that we should look on everything related to public works. So again, there is a big portion is the WPCA. Now, the WPCA is committed to $100 million capital projects in the next 10 years. So I think that maybe I understand, Josh, the position that you guys we're not going to make it as a requirement, but will be willing to one. But at the same time, I think it is good to have an engineer. Sometimes when you're talking, when you're in meetings with other agencies, I think that is important that they understand that the person has that type of background when they are pushing back on something.
No, I think that's very helpful feedback. And obviously, you know, one of the reasons we're bringing this, you know, tonight is to, you know, have some more substantive discussion, you know, and obviously that's why we do this. So Lisa, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Nothing more on that ordinance. It's pretty straightforward. We were thinking to take it to public hearing at our next meeting. Brian, if we were to add back the PE requirement, is that a substantive change that we could make at that time, or to delete it? Should we add it back and then delete it if we agree? Like, how do we we're just trying to get to the place, like, should we go to public hearing or should we go one more round?
I don't think it's a significant change, seeing that it was I believe it was in the ordinance already and was removed, so. If it was to be inserted back in, it's, no change from what we currently have, just it's a change within the process, so that's not a significant change. Now, I think if you went to public hearing and you inserted the engineering degree back in, I think you wouldn't need a second public hearing for that particular change.
That's the question that I had. Johan, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So if I understand correctly, the role is primarily managerial, administrative, kind of delegates technical tasks to the appropriate people. And so what you're saying, what everyone essentially saying is that in lieu of that, other sort of certifications can be allowed, like let's say budget, finance, environmental knowledge, or like an MBA, or like a certification, let's say project management. Is that my
Vanessa can speak to this better than anyone else on this call, considering it is her job, but as much as it is, that she comes into it as an engineer, there's a lot of it that is managerial. She is the chief operating officer and oversees, parks, DPW, engineering, facilities. I mean, there's a lot of administrative work that comes with her position that frankly has nothing to do with it being an engineer. But again, I think I don't, I just want to make sure that we're sort of clear that the job actually has a much larger scope that sometimes we as common council members encounter or frankly envision, because obviously how omnipresent Vanessa is on DPW matters of DPW, and sometimes we forget that like Parks is part of Rec and Parks is part of DPW. So I think that's worth noting, and I think Johan, you're like,
I'm sorry to interject. I just wanted to make sure that what I was saying was accurate, just to double check. The language as currently in the ordinance says you must have an engineering degree, so it was removed. So again, my first opinion stands as is, that it wouldn't be a significant change.
Great.
Just wanted to double check.
Thank you we always appreciate that, Brian. So other thoughts? Are people comfortable sending it to public hearing with the idea that we have a month to consider some of these comments we've gotten from the committee? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to take it to public hearing at our next meeting, which I believe is November, I gotta look. November
19th.
19th? Okay.
Yep.
Yes, November 19th. So thank you, Josh, for the motion. All in favor to take it to public hearing at the 19th?
Okay.
That looks unanimous. Great, thank you. So we changed the agenda to talk about 95, which is the ordinance that covers sidewalks. So if you could bring that up, Brian, these are pretty small changes. Once again, just a little bit of coordination with Complete Streets. And we're just introducing this for the first time. We won't take this to public hearing until probably December. At our November meeting, we'll consider a final draft.
Still trying to find it. Hold on.
I know it's at the bottom of the agenda. Very bottom, because we're skipping over blight for a quick second.
Bear with me 1 second. I need to get rid of some of these screens, otherwise I might be able to find it.
We have tiny changes, so it's very last page.
There it is.
Several pages, yeah.
It's tough to see because the first page has very small writing.
Yeah, I'm having the same trouble. So it's actually not the very last page. It's actually long, but small changes. Yeah, there we go. It's so hard to read. Can we make it any bigger? I'm like so old that
Sure. Hold
I'm
on.
squinting to a degree that I can't even really read. There we go.
How's that?
That's better. So basically what we tried to do in this is to fold in the complete streets, and I'm not going to go to it in detail because it really is a lot. I commend this to everybody's reading for the first time, because we'll talk about it in greater detail at the next meeting, but we just tried to, again, this ordinance was written well before TMP was a glint in our eyes, and so and the complete streets hadn't been passed. So we've just tried to pick up the complete streets language and coordinate it in this ordinance. So we won't need to go into it great detail. We've added some definitions as we roll down. We've included a mobility, the transportation. You'll see a lot of the same ordinances. And then again, it's a lot about the collaboration between TMP and DPW. So when we come to the next hearing, we'll get into more details about it. But as you can see, a lot of it's just cleanup in our usual way and incorporating complete streets language as needed. Because sidewalks are going to be something that's pretty well implemented. I'm just not sure that there's much to do. Josh, you have a thought about it? I mean, it's just not a lot.
I think you
really.
covered it.
Yeah, just not really a lot to change in this, other than to include the
Number 9
reference to
certainly
complete
the
streets.
more substantive set of changes.
Yeah.
I really don't have a whole lot to add to this.
Yeah, I don't think we just basically included the language in this. So we'll go through it in more detail at the next ordinance when it goes to public hearing. So that's the thinking on that. And now what we can do is turn our attention to blight. If you want to go through that, Brian, really fast, and that is something that
Yep.
perhaps we could take this to public hearing if everybody's comfortable with it.
These are more minor changes. I'll be pulling it up in a second. These are just as a precursor to what you're going to see. These changes track directly from the amendments, the public act that was just passed and went into effect on October 1 of 2024. Just got to find it here. Bear with me 1 second. There it is. So the big changes in 58A4, 58A1, the only change here that I inserted was a definition of commercial real property. Again, because you'll see in 58A-4 for the first time, the state has decided to specifically break out the fines and penalties for different types of property owners. So there's the definition in 58A1, which is why 58A1 is here. All the rest of it, as you can see, there's no changes there. 58A4 is where the real change is. Specifically in 58A4, subsection B, subsection 1, and then you see A, subsections A through D. The process has been amended. Specifically, there were fines of $150 per day, $250 per day, and $1,000 per day, depending on the type of property. Here, the state has broken it down further, and for real property owners who contain 6 or fewer dwelling units, it goes to the original fine schedule of $150 per day, $250 per day, $1,000 per day. The only change in that first subsection is that it's limiting it to real property containing 6 or fewer dwelling units. The more significant
Brian?
Yep.
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
Why 6 or fewer when we have a difference between 3? Does that come from the state, or
That comes from the state, yes. So these amendments come directly from the state language, where they are differentiating between smaller properties and larger ones. As you can see in subsection B, more than 6 but fewer than 40 dwelling units, they're charging 10 cents per square foot for real property. 40 or more, 12 cents per square foot, and then they differentiate commercial real property from these residential properties, and commercial property is capped at 10 cents per square foot. So those are the changes that were made by the state pertaining to blight. Again, under our current system, it would be $150 per day, or $250 or $1,000, but the state has changed what we're allowed to charge, and the city only has the ability to conduct blight and enforce blight based on 7-148 of the general statutes. And so the changes that I'm telling you in the public act are going to be instituted into 7-148. So if we want to continue to enforce blight effectively, we need to make these changes to the blight ordinance so that we can enforce blight as to all property owners, whether they're commercial property or whether they're, residential units of 6 or less, 6 to 40, or 40 or more. I have not looked through the legislative history yet. If you ask me, I will, as to why or what caused the state to recommend these types of changes. I can certainly see what their thought process was in the legislative history of this public act. I'm more than happy to do that. I haven't had a chance to do it yet. I wanted to make sure that we had the language correct so that you could all see it. But I'm more than happy to provide an update as to what was behind their thought process when they came up with these changes, if that's what you would like, Heather, or anybody.
So my question was, because I know that like the building inspector can go in and inspect, I guess they have to inspect every year.
Yeah, I know the fire marshal has a limitation in that regard as it pertains to inspections of, I forgot the property numbers. I think it might be two or more or something like that.
So why wouldn't 3 be the magic number of allowing blight to, that line in the sand? I'd like to kind of.
Wait, so you want to know whether, because it's 3 buildings of 3 apartments or more, right, Brian, for the fire inspectors? Is that what we remember?
It's either 2 or 3. I believe it's 3.
I think it's 3 we fixed that a few years ago, Heather. I'm kind of remembering 3.
They inspect units, buildings with units of 3 or more. So if they go into units of 3 or more on an annual basis, it would make more sense to, I don't know, but if it comes from the state, I don't know. I was
right. So what I'll do is, because you certainly are raising a valid point. So what I'll do is I'll take a look at the legislative history behind this public act and see what made them come up with this, because basically the language that we had before, 150, 250, 1,000, has now been limited to residential units of 6 or fewer dwelling units, and everyone else is in there's a different ball game now for the rest of them. A lot of them now, the rest of them are being dealt with cents per square foot, which is not, so I don't know if their thought process was to be harder on them or take it easy on them. I don't know what their process is, but I will look into the legislative history of what these representatives and senators were saying during these hearings that they had on this particular act.
Don't make yourself crazy. I'm just wondering, 6 seems like a random number where 3 would seem like a reasonable connection.
Right, and you're right to point out the fire marshal does have, pursuant to state statute, the fire marshal has the ability, well, the fire marshal must go into residences that I believe are 2 or more units. I believe you're correct. By state statute on an annual basis, which puts a lot of pressure on our fire marshals, which is why we went to go make the change that we made. I digress. But less than that, they cannot go in that regard. So interesting why they chose 6 or fewer. I'll take a look and I'll report back to you guys.
It would be good if they had the ability, if they go into a 5-unit or a 4-unit place, to be able to have the tools under this, to determine blight.
Now, what I will say is that some of the issues as it pertains to blight obviously occur outside the property. So they would still be, I mean, in those situations, they could still be subject, like, there's 3 empty cars sitting on the front lawn of somebody's house that has 6 or fewer units. We could go with the charges. Whatever another piece of blight, another potential enforcement action on blight, but this occurs on a commercial property and it's visible, or someone is called to the property, like the police or something like that, and then they see it, they can certainly call and a blight action could be, the enforcement action process could start. But again, I'll take a look at the legislative history and see what their thought process was behind this.
But just so I understand it, and so we all understand it, we're just making the changes to conform with the state law. So we couldn't say 3 or fewer, because that's not what the state law is suggesting for these fines.
I'm not suggesting that, Lisa.
Right, no, I think Heather just wants to find out why. Yes.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make, just so that the record's clear, but
So
I get it, Heather. I'm interested too.
I'll take a look at why they came up with this. 1, 2, we can't do something that's different than the state. So if we just ignored what the state was doing, we'd be hamstrung. We'd only be able to charge 150, 250, and 1,000 for the 6 or fewer dwelling units, and then we wouldn't be able to enforce blight on these other potential property owners. So it kind of expands the power a little bit. In that regard, it allows the blight officers to enforce it as to everybody, or at least the universe that has been created by the state. But but I will report back on that on the thought process.
Yeah, don't
But in
make
the
yourself
meantime,
crazy.
yeah, but in the meantime, this is pretty straightforward, and it certainly gives us another tool and toolbox, and certainly helps with the idea that we can not scare people into good behavior, but get better behavior because the fines are now more substantial. So I think that this is something that's pretty straightforward, and we could take it straight to public hearing if everybody's comfortable with that. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to take the blight ordinance to public hearing at our next meeting. Thank you, Heather. All in favor of that? Great, good. So that is the last piece of business. So I can also entertain a motion to adjourn. And thank you, everybody, for the good work. Thank you very much, Nora, for making the motion. We're all in favor of that. Great. So thanks, everybody. A lot of work tonight, but appreciate all the help.
Thank you to everyone who isn't on the committee that showed up.
Thank you all.
Thank you to all the people who spoke, and thank you for everyone who came tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank
night. Go
Vanessa and
Yankees.
Jim.
Bye, everybody.